Hi, I'm Bobby Tomberlin, and you're tuned in to Picking It Out with Andrew Pope.
Well, it's another podcast. Gonna be picking it out. Yeah, it's another podcast. Gonna be picking it out. We got Bobby Tomberlin in the house. Yeah, and we're gonna be picking it out. Hey, y'all. Hope y'all doing good. Thank you for tuning in once again to Picking It Out. My name's Andrew Pope. And real excited this morning, or this week. Y'all don't know it's this morning yet, but or not at all, actually, I guess. But got a multi-talented dude here. He's a singer-songwriter. He's been a country DJ in his early days. He's wrote songs for everybody, just about it that you could think of. Just a really good songwriter, and got some new music out, and a great artist, and a good dude, Bobby Tomberlin. What's going on, man?
Oh, man. Well, thank you, number one, for those kind words, and I love your cap.
Roll Tide.
Roll Tide, and
we hope.
Actually in my hometown of Luverne, Alabama today. I'm parked to get good reception. I'm parked in front of the Crenshaw County Courthouse.
There you go.
That's country.
Oh, yeah. You can't get no countryer than that, man.
No, believe me.
Maybe if you go down to Bruton, Alabama, where old William Lee Golden's from, I bet that's pretty country out there.
You know what? It really is. I wasn't too far from there last night. When I'm down here, I love to just hop in the car and take my dad out, and just drive around. I lost my mom back in November, so I try to get down here every few weeks. And we ended up in Greenville last night. And then, 15 minutes away is Georgiana, where Hank Williams was born. Well, not born, but close to there. And, a boyhood home there. So we kind of took that in. It's always kind of fun to walk downtown Georgiana. I mean, none of the stores hardly are open. And, the railroad track runs right through the middle of town. So
I'm sorry about your mom, by the way. I lost mine in May, so I know how you feel.
That's about as tough as it gets. I mean, it's really, that's been, what a life changer. I mean, but, you just move on and push through.
Yeah, the best you can. It's hit me harder than I really thought that it would. I knew it'd be hard because you only got one mama. But man, it's been harder than I even thought. And it'll hit me out of nowhere. I mean, here it is almost November, and it'll just kind of hit me out of nowhere, man. And it's like, I'll have a few good days, and then I'll just I won't even know why I'm sad. But then, my wife she knows more than I do most of the time.
I know. It is weird how it will just hit you out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Because there's days I'll think, man, I'm really doing much better. And then you just want to pick up the phone. And it's really it can be really tough when you're back, like in my case, in my hometown. And it's still a big adjustment. But, I just have to be thankful for the time I had. And I know that sounds cliche, but you really have to.
You have to.
Because a lot of people don't get, that many years with their mom. So
yeah,
we're blessed.
We are. We sure are. Well, how was Laverne, Alabama, growing up when you did in that small town? Because I'm from a small town in Alabama too, as you know.
Tell me the town again.
It's in Geraldine, up around Fort Payne.
Right. Oh, what a great area.
Oh yeah.
I love Fort Payne. Well, the big difference, between us, you've got those beautiful mountains, and It's a feeling unlike anywhere else where you're from. I mean, it's funny. I drove through Fort Payne about a year ago, and man, it just made me feel good being there, the air and everything. But anyway, getting back to my hometown, I want to say a lot hasn't changed. And the reason for that is the heart of the people. They're just some of the friendliest people. They say, on the sign, the welcome sign here says, "Welcome to the friendliest city in the South." And it's really true. It's one of the most friendliest. And, it's one of those towns. You go to the grocery store and you're there for an hour just visiting with people. And I love it. I feel good here. I mean, like I said, I'm doing this, podcast in front of the Crenshaw County Courthouse. It just makes me happy. There's peace here.
Yeah.
There's not big traffic jams. That's for sure.
No, maybe a little tractor traffic here and there. It's about all you run into.
During the summer.
Yeah.
During the summertime, going to the beach, we do get a lot of beach traffic because there's not a bypass. And I'm glad there isn't, because in this town, almost every one of the stores downtown, the space is being used. There's an old ice cream shop here, and, the old hardware store. The hardware store here actually used to be a theater, and Hank Williams played here many times. The Carter family, Marty Robbins.
Wow.
And, you go in to buy some nails. That's where, people like Marty Robbins and Hank Williams walked,
Man, that's something right there.
Yeah. Well, the old Chevrolet dealership, which now is like a lawnmower shop, and they sell lawnmowers and tractors. It was Hank Williams played at the grand opening, and you've probably seen the picture before. He's actually playing a fiddle. And, there's like a crowd of 200 people surrounding him. And you would think that he was already a huge star, but he was a regional star. He was playing Montgomery radio, and then he would play, in these areas, south and north and east, west of Montgomery. And so anyway, Hank Williams left, a big print even here in this county. This is the county that joins the county he was born and raised in. So, everywhere you go here, I mean, I could take you literally to 10 spots within an hour in this little area where he played.
Wow. The whole Williams family, I have total respect for, and I'm a big fan, and, probably not as much of an encyclopedia as you are. But I'm pretty damn close, probably. And Hank Williams, I mean, it's amazing. All of the people, and I mean rock stars, pop stars, not just country people, that Hank Williams, man, just, they're like, hey, that's the guy right there. I mean, he's the man. To write those songs, people forget how young he was. That just blows my freaking mind every time I think about it.
And you know what a lot of people don't realize is a lot of those hit songs were written down here. He was singing those songs right here at this Chevrolet dealership 1 year before he had his first hit. He was already singing I Saw the Light. He was already singing Honky Tonk Blues, Honky Tonkin'. Those songs were already written down here.
So he had to be like in his, early 20s, I guess, at that time.
Yeah.
When he wrote all that. Amazing.
It really is.
I miss that in music, man. I miss that, George Jones had that. Haggard, a lot of them had it. Hank Jr. definitely had it all. But I mean,
right.
You just miss that. Like and Don Helms, when you hear that steel coming in, it just it takes you to a place. It makes you, it's changed so much now. And I really miss that heartbeat in country music in general, really. The authenticity.
You know what a lot of it was, and I think, that was during a time when there wasn't a lot of money to be made either. And
right.
People like George Jones, I've read his books and read and heard interviews, but people like him and Hank Williams, they played for the love of it. They weren't even thinking about success. Hank Williams wasn't even thinking about going to Nashville. I mean, I've heard that from many people around here. Now, he did want to get his songs recorded. And when big artists would come to Montgomery or the surrounding areas, he would pitch songs. But, man, he was just playing for the love of it. If it hadn't have been for Audrey, I really believe he would have never even gone to Nashville. And that's not taking anything away from him with his talent. Mm-hmm. He was just doing it for the love of it. And so many of those people, like you mentioned, that's the case. I mean, Merle Haggard loved Lefty Frizzell and went to see him and do a show, and Lefty says, okay, sing a song. I mean, it was all just about the love. Yeah.
And I think that comes across to people, man. That's the thing. It's like you can tell the difference if somebody really loves it.
I'm not saying people don't. Yeah, excuse me. I'm not saying that people don't love and have passion for music today. Let me clear that up. But it was just a whole different time. It was just we're talking about days before TV, before most people had a television. So it was just a whole different time. And
it was.
But I'll have to say, man, I grew up with that kind of passion, and I'm sure you did too. I'm definitely not comparing myself to those guys, but I'm saying as far as the passion, I would have walked miles to see Merle Haggard or Hank Williams Jr. or George Jones. I just loved it.
Yeah. Well, how did you get into DJing?
Well, I had first of all, a lot of my family members tell me, even when I was like 4 months old, they had to have the radio on or I would cry. They had to keep the radio on. And I was just, oh, really?
They said I would hum in tune in my crib. I don't, no explanation, but.
I doubt I was in tune.
You're I'm still a little out of tune.
But no, I just, I was singing on tree stumps, singing Hank Williams songs and, records and, and my family, for the most part, they're not musical. I had a couple of uncles who played the guitar and they showed me chords on the guitar. But I had a make-believe radio station in my bedroom when I was like 5 years old. I would do the weather forecast and try to read the news. I would jot down. I can't even imagine doing that at 5 years old. And it's so funny. It's kind of sounds like I was so smart, but in school I was terrible. My grades weren't that great. And the teachers used to tell me, they were like, if you would only apply yourself and dedicate so much time, just half the time you do to music, there would be such a change in your grades. But anyway, make-believe radio station. And one Saturday morning, my dad and I were at an old Western auto store. I don't know if you remember those stores. You may be too young. But it was just one of those stores where they had everything from record players to washers and dryers. And they had a record rack. And we would go in there every Saturday morning. Actually, it's one street over from where I'm doing this podcast. And a gentleman by the name of Mr. Joe Rex Sport, he owned the radio station. And he was the superintendent of education here in the county. And kind of an odd combination there. But he gave jobs to a lot of the school kids after school. And anyway, my dad just approached him and said, Ben, Bobby is just ate up with, has a little make-believe radio station, loves music so much. Can he come down there sometime? And I went down there that afternoon. And Mr. Sport's son, Tom, he let me cue up a record right there and get on the air. And then from that moment, I was hooked. And then after a little bit of time, I became the afternoon and weekend disc jockey at that station. Funny thing, the guy I'm talking about, Tom, he was smart. He didn't go into music. He's a judge here, and he's here at this courthouse. He's in here as we speak, and here we are all these years later.
Full circle.
Oh, gosh, it just hit me as I was saying that.
Yeah, it's... It was probably a little different back then, I guess, than it is now.
Yeah, I mean, I've told this in many interviews. There was a Billboard magazine resource book, and it had all of the office numbers, Ray Price Enterprises, Hank Williams Jr. Enterprises, Fair and Young, Johnny Cash. And I just started dialing up these numbers, asking if I could get an interview with these people. And, we're talking the early 80s. And it just seemed like a very easy thing. I mean, I remember secretaries saying, oh, yeah, 2:00, call this number and Mr. Arnold, Eddie Arnold, will be able to chat for 10 or 15 minutes. And I have most of those interviews on cassette.
Oh, that's great.
And I hadn't been to Nashville at that time either. So that was just creating more excitement for the first time that I did go.
Who was the first one that you got to interview? The first one that you were like, man, this is something here.
I can remember it very well. Fair and Young. And
wow.
For anyone watching or listening that they don't know Farron, the song that Willie Nelson wrote, Hello Walls.
Hello Walls.
Yeah. And he was huge. He was a huge star. But by that time, he was still doing a lot of shows, wasn't recording much, but I did an interview with him. My second one I remember was with Jeannie C. Riley, Harper Valley PTA.
Oh, yeah.
And then I just, from there, Bobby Bear, and then a few in person too, when there would be concerts in Montgomery, I would go up there and go to the press conferences like the group Alabama and, or over in Troy, I remember Ronnie Millsap and Shelley West and David Frizzell came over there. And boy, what a magical time. I mean, and again, I'm not one of these guys I don't live in the past, but boy, when I do reflect, I think a lot of times I didn't realize how special it was at the time, because at that time, all of my heroes were still alive.
Mm-hmm.
Even when I came to Nashville, even Roy Acuff was still playing the Opry in the early 90s, so.
Yeah. Well, how did you get Mel Tillis' attention? I know he was kind of pivotal.
Well, he really was. And when I left, I worked through high school at a radio station here in my hometown of Luverne. Then I went to a town, Andalusia, Alabama. One of the things they're famous for is Hank and Audrey Williams got married there.
Yeah.
But I went to work there, and it was actually Hank Williams' cousin, Edna, who got me the gig. The radio station here burned down. I worked at the Pepsi-Cola bottling company warehouse for a few months, and it was killing me. A guy trying to write songs and had been hiding behind a microphone all those years. I'm like, I've got to get out of here and do something with music, even if it's getting back into radio. But I was going to take a job at a radio station in Greenville, Alabama, which was about 20 minutes from my hometown. And Hank Williams' cousin Edna called me and she said, we know the manager. My husband and I know the manager at this station in Andalusia. And I'm like, no, it doesn't matter. I've got a gig in Greenville. She says, we're going to take you. You're going to at least go down there and have a meeting with him. I'm like, okay, fine. And we go, and I walk in the door, and the manager meets me, and he says, oh, the guy working right now is a songwriter, and he's going to be leaving in about 3 months. He came home for a few months to take care of his sick parents. His name's Billy Henderson. And Billy at that time had written for T.G. Shepherd, Jerry Reed, and several other artists. And so they hired me. I was working on the AM station. He was on the FM. And we were working side by side. And I started pitching him song ideas. And he became my mentor in songwriting. And that led me to Muscle Shoals. He eventually went back. And he was roommates with Marty Rabin and Mike McGuire of this new group at the time, Shenandoah. Marty got married. There was a radio gig opened in Muscle Shoals, had opened up. And Billy came home and he says, man, there's a room in our apartment. Shenandoah is going to hit the road. I'm going to be their road manager. $69 a month, your part. Can you imagine that? No. And I got the radio gig and off to Muscle Shoals I went. There was a guy there by the name of Jim Martin, songwriter who's had a lot of cuts. And he was there going to school at UNA, University of North Alabama. And we started writing songs. And one day he told me, well, I'm done. I've graduated. I'm going to Nashville. And I'm like, Jim, why would you go to Nashville? Stay in Muscle Shoals. No, I'm going to Nashville. Well, he gets an internship with Mel Tillis's publishing company. And he plays Mel some of our songs and some of his songs. And Mel starts demoing them. And I drove up for one of the demo sessions in Nashville. And Mel says, how would you like a contract? And I'm like, what kind of contract? I mean, I had no idea you could even get a contract if you hadn't already had 10 hits. So anyway, $100 a week. And I went back and gave a 2 weeks notice, and off to Nashville I went and worked at Kroger at nighttime and wrote for Mel Tillis's publishing company during the daytime. And I always have to say, Jim Martin, gosh, it's funny, the links, the connections. Yeah. Like if I had have gone to that other radio station down here, I very well could have just settled and never, ever pursued songwriting on a serious level, because I had been to Nashville one time at that point, and my dad drove me up there, and man, I was intimidated. I'm like, I don't know anyone. So I came back really kind of thinking I'm just going to be in radio and that's going to be good enough. But again, I went to the other radio station, met my songwriting mentor, go to Muscle Shoals. And even though I was roommates with one of the Shenandoah guys, and they were very supportive, by the way, huge, but it took meeting another guy who was hungry, just like I was, just to break through somehow, to get some attention. And that's what I always tell people. A lot of people, they ask, oh, how do I do that? I need to meet someone famous. I said, really, you need to just maybe connect with someone who's kind of at a level like you are, and have, that has that drive and that hunger, because it's amazing what can come out of that. Yeah.
Wow. It one thing does lead to another. That's how it's been in my case. Just if you keep doing it, you're going to progress. And
absolutely.
And then you may kind of slide back from that, but then you may kind of go a little forward a little more. Something good may happen out of something bad. Like you said, all the links are connected, to make it all. It's everybody I've talked to, and myself included, that's kind of how it's been. One thing leads to this leads to that. But
how
there's people out there, and I feel like in that old days in Nashville, Bobby Bear, Mel Tillis, people like that kind of had some clout. They would give people a chance. And I don't feel like it's that way anymore so much. It's just different. It's a whole different animal now. But what a time to be there. That had to be the best time to be a part of that whole Music Row deal, my opinion.
Well, I feel like I got in right on the end of all of that. Mm-hmm. That, like I said, so many heroes were still alive then. So at Mel's publishing company, it was a 2-story building, and he rented out office space to other people. So George and Nancy Jones had an office, a booking agent by the name of Joe Taylor, who booked Porter Wagoner, Connie Smith, Little Jimmy Dickens, Fair and Young. So you'd walk in and you never knew who you were going to see. Scott Hendricks, who is one of the heads of Warner Brothers now, he had an office and he was producing Brooks and Dunn. I remember hearing Boot Scoot and Boogie upstairs when they were listening to the first mix. So yeah, you'd walk in, you might see Ronnie Dunn, you might see Little Jimmy Dickens and his wife, or George Jones complaining, wanting to go home to see Gunsmoke. And then Mel Tillis may come. Yeah, right. And our Mel Tillis may be in from Branson, and maybe Roger Miller is visiting him for a couple of hours. I mean, it really was, it was a special time. I wish we'd have had cell phone cameras back then.
Oh man. Yeah, that'd have been, it's almost better that you didn't, because that's yours. That's yours. That's yours. You get to have that, some of the moments that I've experienced with guys like Bobby Bear, I spent the night at him and Jeannie's house one time. We were writing, and, they were just generous people. And he had, he's got Shell's old guitar, And then he's got the Fender, the Telly that the Waylon gave him that's got the W on the neck. I think it's in the Hall of Fame now. But there's a picture that Jeannie took of me and him. He's got Shell's guitar, and then I've got the Waylon Telecaster. I would not trade anything for that. Nothing.
No, that's huge.
I love him. You know, I haven't talked to him in a while, but man, I love that guy.
Yeah, and to think, you know, here's a guy who was recording for RCA Records back in the 60s, and he heard Waylon Jennings sing in a bar, and he calls Chet Atkins and says, "You've got to sign him." Yeah. And as I heard Bobby tell in an interview, he's like, really? I was kind of cutting my own throat. He and I were doing kind of the same thing. But, I mean, that really says a lot about someone.
Man, it really does. I mean, that's, you know, he played me a video one time on YouTube on his phone when I was sitting in the living room over there at their house. It was a live performance of Waylon doing "Loving Her Was Easier," and he had tears in his eyes, man. And he said, "That's the Waylon Jennings I fell in love with. That's why I called Chet." And that's a real thing. That's a real thing.
Wow.
You know, then we get up the next morning and he's frying bacon. And, you know, he's kind of like slow mode, you know. And the damn grease popped. I've never seen it move so fast. That was so funny, man.
Oh, that's a funny thought.
And he talked about when Hoyt Axton got down and he used to live down the road, and he said he'd go over and make breakfast for him. You know, just stuff like that, man. I'm just a sponge.
Well, absolutely.
It's amazing. Do you remember the first song after you signed with Mel that you got cut? Or how long?
Oh, the first one cut by a major artist with Billy Dean. And it was a couple of years actually into my contract. I mean, I worked at Kroger, you know, every night watching the clock, and we'd go in and write. And somehow, well, no, not somehow. I know how it happened. Mel Tillis, the lady who worked in the office that kind of handled the contracts for the songs, she had let Billy Dean, when he first come to town, stay in a guest house on her property. And she says she heard a song that I had written with Stephen Dale Jones, and she said, "Give me a rough mix of that. I'm going to go to Billy Dean's session tonight and just kind of visit and hang out. And I'd love to pitch that." And she pitched it to him on a break, and he cut it. And she called me at Kroger, and I couldn't even I was just out of my mind. I couldn't bag groceries. I couldn't check out anyone. And I was so excited. I got to hear the rough mix of the actual recording the next day. And, you know, I come back here to my hometown telling everyone, "Oh, I finally got me a song cut." And then the guy who was running Capitol Records at the time, Jimmy Bowen, he just totally shelved the album. And he came in and took over production. And so that song never came out. And then that was the case for the next 2 or 3 songs. I mean, I had 2 or 3 that never, you know, were released. But finally, Linda Davis, she recorded a song called "Love Didn't Do It, He Did." And it came out, and it was a single. And that did so much for me. Just gave me so much more confidence and just, you know, just enough taste to just keep on going and working hard.
Yeah. And then you had a little song that people may know. It was a little song. I don't know if it was ever a hit or not. I don't know if it's number one, called "One More Day" by some group. Diamond Rio, I think was their name.
2 More Days by Diamond Trio. That's what Grandpa Jones, he introduced them one time at the Opry and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, Diamond Trio."
I love it. Oh, I've heard so many good grandpa stories, man.
Oh, yeah.
I'd love to meet that guy. Oh, man.
Yeah. I'm thinking about one, but I really can't tell it. But what a funny guy. But yeah, Diamond Rio, that was such a blessing with the song getting paired with the right artist, because it really needed those harmonies, I think, to really let it be what it could really be. And the way they play their own instruments, it was just really magic when they went in and recorded that song.
I actually didn't know that. They played their own session on that.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. They never brought in other musicians. They played everything, like Djing the mandolin, Jimmy the guitar, and Dan on the keyboard. I mean, just really, really amazing musicians.
Wow. And that was a multi-week. I mean, how many weeks was that at number one?
It was, well, and it actually ended up crossing over in the adult contemporary chart, and in the mainstream pop chart, and that was just kind of crazy. I mean, we knew we had something special when we wrote that song, but we never dreamt that it would do what it did. And it connected with so many people who, were losing and had lost loved ones, and was being used immediately in memorial services. And then a few months later, 9/11 happened, and that totally took it to another place, and where it was being used for 9/11 tributes.
That had to be really like a whole nother level of special when that happened.
It was a whirlwind, because, I mean, I'd had songs recorded and had singles, but nothing like that. And I mean, looking back at it now, a lot of it was just a blur. I mean, you go from literally like just pretty much zero to, nominations for award shows and interviews and, just the whole craziness that happens when a record hits like that. And it was just a lot. It was a whirlwind. And then getting emails and letters, like Diamond Rio's management office would send us all of these letters from people, and they would be very specific with their stories, how they had lost a child or lost a companion. And it was just there was a period, it was like hundreds of them a week. And I would just sit down, and it was just overwhelming. It really was.
Yeah, I can't imagine. I really can't imagine how that would, 9/11, it just kind of, it was a terrible tragedy, but it brought everybody together. Now it's so far from that, but it was nice just for a little while for everybody to be united together like we should be.
Boy, wasn't it though? I mean, such a shame that something like that had to happen, but still, I remember just driving down in Nashville, even at a Walgreens, on their sign, "God bless the USA."
Yeah.
Everywhere you looked, and with what's happened in the past year and a half with this pandemic, at first I thought it was going to really bring people together, but boy, that hasn't been the case, unfortunately.
No, it hasn't. It's, I'll be glad when all this is over. And unfortunately it's news, to keep people at, separate ends of the thing. I mean, and it because it creates stories and news and clicks and what have you. And, I feel like it a lot of times the news just divides us more, but
I tell you, I'm, like the Hank Jr. song says, I'm for love. I'm for happiness.
Yeah.
That's what I'm for. I tell you, life's tough enough, especially this past year.
Yeah. I had a thought after you said that song, because I remember a version, and I'm for, if you don't like Hank Williams, kiss this ass. Have you heard that?
Oh yeah.
A few times.
I think it's on the live record, actually.
Oh man, it's man, what a hell of an entertainer. I mean, he's like, for me, that's it. Like, do you remember the first time you met him? Was it when you was doing the radio stuff?
Oh gosh, I thought you were going to say the first time I ever saw a concert of his, and that was my first concert actually in Mount Olive, Alabama, the Hank Williams Memorial Celebration. I was just a little kid, and first concert, Hank Williams Jr., maybe the second show after the Mountain Fall.
Wow!
And in the program, it still had a picture pre-Mountain Fall. It was so fresh; things were so new. They didn't even have publicity photos for the new look. And he came out there. I'll never forget. He came out there and he had one of those Les Paul Gibsons. And he said, "All right, folks, this ain't the same Bocephus that you've seen in the past." And he went into Sweet Home Alabama at least volume 9. And I had never seen anything like that. And it just really changed my life. And with Hank Jr., he really just, when you go to his show, you get 100% of him. You know what I mean? He really opens up his heart. He says what's on his mind at that minute. And he just sings his heart out. I mean, he really does. And it's quite a musical journey. But anyway, that was the first time I saw him. The first time I met him, I got to know Merle Kilgore when I was a kid, and a lady named Connie Smith, not the singer Connie Smith, but a Connie Smith that worked in his offices in Coleman, Alabama, and they invited me to come to a museum opening in Nashville on Demonbreun now, where the Tin Roof and so many of the bars are. There used to be Waylon Jennings Museum, the Conway Twitty Record Shop. Alabama had a store. Well, anyway, there was a Hank Williams Jr. Family Tradition Museum. And they invited me to come to the grand opening. And that was my second trip to Nashville. And I just couldn't believe it. I walked in and there's Johnny Cash, June Carter, Waylon Jennings, Jesse Coulter, Dickie Betts of the Allman Brothers, and Hank Jr. And it's like, again, I was very young. And what do you say to someone? When I walked up and I think I said something stupid like, "Well, how's the deer hunting down in Troy, Alabama," which is the town next to my hometown. And he was kind. It's like, "Well, if you want to get a deer, go to Troy." And that was the meeting.
That sounds about right.
Yeah. But he was nice. I mean, he wasn't rude.
Yeah.
But it's funny, but he's a nice guy. Such a good, it's amazing that he has walking about sense after all he's been through. And a lot of people have given him a hard time, but he has a right. I'm just going to go ahead and say it. He has a right to say whatever he wants to.
Oh, yeah.
And really pretty much do what he wants to, because, shoved out there at 8 years old and, opening shows for Ernest Tubb and Grandpa Jones, and then ends up having to be the headliner because everybody wants to see Hank Williams as kid.
Yeah.
And I mean, I can't imagine that, wearing some of the clothing, playing your dad that you never knew, that you maybe have one or two memories of, playing his guitar. I can't even comprehend what that must have been like, growing up so quick and being around people like Fats Domino at a young age, showing you, how to play the piano, Jerry Lee Lewis, or going to Earl Scruggs' house for banjo lessons. And again, I mean, just even talking about it just blows my mind. And then, of course, having your brain knocked out when you're in your 20s on a mountain fall, literally the guy with him had to kind of shove his brain back in with two fingers, and to literally having your face broken to pieces and so many surgeries. And then just dealing with the whole Nashville establishment of the 60s and early 70s, where they wanted him to just be the reincarnation of his dad. I mean, his booking agent back then, I've heard in interviews and I've read and heard from people that were there that, no, they were like, no. They don't want to hear your songs, sing your dad's songs.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. I'm sure it was pretty cool when you're 9 and 12 years old, but when you're hitting 23, 24, that's a whole different story. But boy, has he survived, and so many other losses and heartaches. But if there's ever, I mean, his picture should be beside the definition and be beside the word survivor in the dictionary.
100%. And thank God for Merle Kilgore. I say that all the time. I never met Merle.
Oh, what a character.
But man, yeah, I've heard. And thank God for him. He was the one damn guy that just, he had to be like, it had to be weird because of the age difference thing too. He had to be like, kind of like a brother to him, but also kind of like a dad figure, kind of guiding him and, you know, dragging him out there, trying to keep him focused on the shows and the business stuff. And at the same time, he encouraged him, man. I feel like nobody encouraged, you know, Hank Jr. to do his own stuff because, like you said, it was like that in his early 20s and all this. And Merle,
that's
man,
interesting. I've never thought about that, but you're right. It wasn't like there was a group around him saying,
no,
okay, find yourself musically. You're right there. And, you know, he had to go to Muscle Shoals, Alabama to find it, to find himself musically. And boy, did he. Yeah.
And I think Waylon was a big part in that too. The me and
that's true.
Me and Shooter are very good friends, and we geek out on this Hank stuff all the time. And our record is The New South. That's my favorite Hank. It's just something there. It's just, you can almost kind of feel like you're there, and you can hear his true artistry coming out. I mean, the Hank Jr. and Friends, I think, was really pivotal, but The New South to me just encompasses everything, you know. And Waylon just, I mean, you can, even Uncle Pen, the way they did it, they had Rick Hall playing the fiddle. You can hear him kind of say, all right, jump in there, Rick, you know, and he's like, well, do it while the machine's on. Go ahead and play one. I love that, you know.
Oh, God. That was another moment that changed my life. When I heard that record, when I heard Feeling Better.
Yes.
And, you know, and it was really stripped down.
Yeah.
Not overproduced by any means. And then I heard those Steve Young songs like Montgomery in the Rain. And
oh, yeah. Long Way to Hollywood.
Long Way. Oh. And then The New South, too, in that song. And that was unlike any. I mean, Waylon was sure doing his thing at that time. And that was really, you know, that was really an inspiration to me. But then I heard Hank, and he was totally doing it in another little area, you know. Yeah, he was on an island by himself.
Yeah. And you know, I feel like about Kilgore, I feel like if it hadn't have been for him, we may not ever he may not ever been what he became. He may not ever felt comfortable enough to express his true songs that, you know, Stoned at the Jukebox, you know, stuff like this that he's writing, Living Proof, my God, you know, all these songs, it's like he's pouring his damn heart out, and nobody encouraged him to do that except for Merle Kilgore. I feel like Merle would sit there like this and just said, play me everything you wrote. I want to hear everything. You know, I feel like he was his only support, even before he was manager. You know, when JR was managing him and Coleman, like he was talking about, Merle was there. He was there.
Those were very important years too. Him being able to come to Coleman, Alabama, and have a place to come to and leave Nashville at that moment. I mean, there couldn't have been better timing for that. I mean, because the heartache that he had gone through at that time, and then then the mountain fall was just around the corner. I mean, it was good that he was in Coleman, Alabama, I think.
Did you ever go by the Montana Exchange store?
Oh gosh, yes, I sure did. That was a great little store. There's a bank sitting there now where it used to be, but oh gosh, yeah, I can remember his office there, and then Merle's office, and the Western store, all the boots, the jeans, and the hats. I mean, it was really cool. And then, of course, the Mary Carter paint store that's in downtown Coleman from the song I've Got Rights. You know, it's still there.
Mm-hmm. I've actually went to the Mary Carter paint store.
Bought a tackle box there last year. I'm glad it's still there.
Mm-hmm. Me too. You got to know Hillary Williams, which is Hank's daughter from
Becky.
Holly and Hillary, and they're the only two from Becky and Hank, right?
Right. It's funny. Holly actually was an intern for Curb Publishing. And it was so funny because I hadn't seen Holly in years. And one day, it was on a Friday, and she says, "Oh, I've got to hurry. I'm going to go to my dad's show this weekend." I said, "Who's your dad?" She said, "Oh, Hank Jr." I'm like, Holly, because I had seen her as a kid. And then Hillary, where did I meet? I met Hillary actually out in Los Angeles when we were nominated for the ACMs. At the hotel where I was staying, there was a bar, and then afterward, Merle Kilgore and Hank's wife, Mary Jane, and I think Kid Rock was there, and Hillary was there, and Mary Jane actually introduced me and told Hillary, "Get a CD. You've made a CD of 3 songs. Get it and get a copy and give it to Bobby." And she did, and I loved it, but I never did call. There was a number on there, and I didn't think, too much about it other than, wow, she has a good voice and a really good voice. But then a few months after that, I was at this recording session. They needed some background vocalist for a song called "The Games People Play" that Hank recorded for his "I'm One of You" record. And they had the producer, Doug Johnson, asked me to come in, and he asked several people to come in. And there was Hillary in the corner, and I'm like, "I know you. Where have I met you?" And then we realized it was from the ACMs, and she said, "Well, we should write sometimes." And she's back then she was very shy. She even says now, she said, "That was so unlike me to do that." But anyway, we exchanged numbers and we started writing songs. And then it wasn't long till, she and Holly had that horrific car accident. Yeah. And Hillary actually died like 2 or 3 times and came back. And she's had over 30 surgeries. It's talking about another miracle, a walking miracle. It's just unbelievable what she's been through.
And you were actually there at the hospital in Memphis, right? When that happened?
Yeah. I'll never forget. I was eating lunch, and a guy by the name of John Ozier, who was working at Curb at the time, called me, and he says, "You're just not going to believe it. Holly and Hillary have been in this terrible accident. I don't know if they're going to make it." And so I rushed to Curb, and Doug Johnson was producing Hank at that time. And he just told me, "Get in the car," and before I could even think about it, we were off to Memphis. And I did see her that next day and just couldn't believe it. I was in shock. And Holly, Holly made it out okay. She had a lot of scrapes and so forth. But I just couldn't believe what was happening and what was to come in the following weeks. I mean, it was not good, but thank God she survived.
I remember watching a press conference that Hank Jr. did from the hospital. And I just remember seeing him like, how is he? I can't imagine what he's going through. I don't know if that time, if she was like, okay, we've got her stable, she's going to have more surgery, but she's good, she's not going to die, or if you were still kind of waiting. But he was emotional, and it was the whole stupid thing happened, and it was it was eventually dismissed. It was something in the Peabody Hotel or whatever. I don't even. Some waitress said he tried to grab her or something. They couldn't prove it, so it's a bunch of hogwash probably. But going through all that and him having to do that to defend.
Absolutely.
That's crazy. It had to be a crazy time to see. I mean, I remember seeing him in that press conference, like he was tore up, man, tore up.
Absolutely. I remember being over there and coming home that weekend, and I just ended up in bed for 2 days. I was just literally sick myself from all of the drama. I mean, it was just too much. I mean, it was up, down, up, down.
Yeah.
Not knowing if she was going to live. And But man, what a testimony she has. Whew.
Yeah. That whole family, man, has just been through a lot, with losing Hank and Mary Jane's daughter, Katie, which I know that you got to know her, and Sam, their son as well. He's killing it right now. I mean, he's big time, and you've been, very close with him in the past few years, but losing Katie like that, I just, my heart kind of sank. I never met him, but my heart just kind of sank, that's gotta be hard.
She was such a sweet soul. I mean, really cared about other people, and their Aunt Loretta, Audrey's sister, who lived, about 30 minutes from my hometown here, she had passed away. And of course it was during the pandemic, but everybody came down for her funeral. So it's crazy to look back how everybody was together and they had that moment there. And then, she passed away the following day after going back home, and what a void. I mean, for so many people, there's so many people loved her. She was a giver. She helped. She loved her community, and just a beautiful person.
I can't imagine what that would be like, that kind of loss, your own child.
I can't either. I know I mentioned losing a mom's about as bad as it could get, but I mean, losing a kid, I have one son, and I just can't even imagine that. So,
how did you get hooked up with Sam? How did you, figure out that he was into music and he was trying to do his own thing?
Well, I remember Sam when he was a kid. I remember him back at the hospital when Hillary and Holly had their accident. I remember him at 8 years old. Hillary and I actually took him to see Gwen Stefani, of all people. We took him to a concert, and he was just a sweet little kid. I remember after the concert, it was at the arena downtown Nashville, and I remember popcorn boxes everywhere and Coke cups, and he was like, "We can't leave yet. We have to clean up." And he was down there cleaning up trash. And, I just started helping him. I remember I'm like, okay, but after a while I said, we need to leave. But I thought that's really something for him to be that considerate. But he was just always so kind. I would see him at the Opry when Holly would perform. She brought him out a couple of times with her, and he would walk up, like have an old shucks attitude. Are you writing any songs? And then he reached out to me on social media and asked me would I consider taking him over to meet Bart Herbison at the Nashville Songwriter Association. And then he played me some of his music, and Bart was blown away. And then the next thing we're doing shows together, in Alaska and Michigan. And we came back and did a hometown show here in my hometown of Luverne. And it was his first full show down here in South Alabama. And gosh, it was like so many people that had seen Hank Sr. came out. And It was just really a cool night. It was very special. But I've loved watching him grow musically and as a person and songwriter wise. He's just got it. He is a natural born songwriter. I couldn't believe some of the lyrics. You were talking about you couldn't believe Hank Sr. writing what he did in his early 20s. Well, I can't believe, some of the things Sam has written, in his early 20s. It's just blows my mind.
And his dad supports him in all this. Has he offered?
Oh yeah, came to his Grand Ole Opry debut, and absolutely,
that's a big deal because he don't care really anything about the Opry. I don't think he's kind of like y'all, because there's that kind of tension there. It always has been. I know he's done a few things at the Grand Ole Opry. He did the Hank Williams memorial thing with when Little Jimmy Dickens. I'll never forget that, watching that. Little Jimmy Dickens, he introduced him too early, and Vince Gill came out, and I'm not Hank Jr. either. Typical Vince Gill fashion.
That was a funny night. I remember that night. What I remember about that night is Hank had T-Tot's grandson.
Yeah.
T-Tot, anyone that don't know, was the blues street singer that showed Hank Sr. the first chords on the guitar, and where Hank Williams really developed a lot of that. Well, no doubt, he developed the whole fusion of the blues with country, blues music with, Ernest Tubb and Roy Acuff all combined. But anyway, he had T-Tot's grandson out there, and he was in a wheelchair, and it was just a beautiful, beautiful night. But no, Sam, I encourage anyone watching or listening to check out his music. He's a brand new record on Universal called Glass House Children, and it's really good. It's not just ear candy. There's a lot of substance there.
And you've gotten to know Hank throughout the years now, and being close with everyone in the Williams family. Has he ever, I don't want to say offered advice or wisdom or knowledge or whatever, but has he ever talked to you about things in his life? Just kind of. I wouldn't, as far as music, that's one reason I feel like I have a friendship with him, because, we talked about South Alabama. We talked about things like, his grandmother with when there's a rattlesnake in the yard, coming out with a hoe and just splitting that snake into, just stuff like that mainly. But there's been some stories definitely from the old days, maybe about Grandpa Jones or Lefty Frizzell, but mainly it's just about that day and just going to find a great restaurant and talking about a lot about South Alabama, and just because that really changed his life growing up, spending time down here with his granddad and grandmother Shepherd. That changed a lot of things with him. Of course it would. When you're raised in Nashville and there's parties at your house on Franklin Road, and then you imagine that, one night there's Perry Como, there's Jerry Lee Lewis, Earl Scruggs, and then you come down here out in the middle of nowhere, dirt roads and country ham frying, and that's the other end of the spectrum, and there's a lot to be learned from that too. Yeah, and he could be a kid there.
Absolutely.
He needed
That's
it.
why I get it. That's why I love coming back here every chance I can, because all of a sudden I'm like that kid again, and not worrying about getting songs recorded, actually getting inspired to write songs, versus being on Music Row, because it's hard to get inspired. I'm not putting it down, but it's hard. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if it was even the 90s, 80s, 70s. You can't. To me, I have to get out and live and get inspired. I just can't go into an office or a room every day and I've got to live. There's some guys that can do that, though.
Yeah.
But I guess, that old fashioned writer where I've got to go out and
me too.
Just experience life. I love, like Tom T. Hall said in an interview one time, he said he would go into these little towns before he really became famous, and he would check in at a mom and pop motel and just set up shop for about 3 days and go to a local cafe every morning, see the same guys, drinking their coffee and reading the newspaper and listening to their conversation. I thought that was brilliant.
Yeah.
I wish I could have known Tom T. Hall. Talking about a great writer. I met him, but he would have been one that would have been really interesting to just spend a few hours with, I think. Talking about wisdom, like everything that it seems like that came out of his mouth was quite was wisdom.
Yeah, him and Christofferson. It's like, okay, write this down. Every time they talk.
Yeah. But yet, Tom T., what a loss, man. I always hated that he retired so soon, but I know he wouldn't have done that if he didn't want to, but good for him. But gosh, it's too bad that another generation didn't get to see him at the Grand Ole Opry.
Man, what a storyteller.
But there's the music, thank goodness. So I encourage everyone to go dig in the old Tom T. Hall catalog, because there is a gold mine.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Anybody that don't know who Tom T. Hall is watching or listening to this, go look it up and buy something. Buy something.
Yeah.
If you're an aspiring songwriter, go look it up. Any Clayton Delaney, Old Dogs, Watermelon. I mean, any, just pick one. You know, Homecoming.
I mean, that's how I got to Memphis.
That's how I got to Memphis.
Conversational lyric.
Yeah.
I learned a lot. I learned a lot from listening to him. Maybe not musically, but lyrically.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, just like in Old Dogs, Children, and Watermelon Wine, I mean, the opening line, "How old do you think I am?" he said. I mean, and I say that in writing appointments a lot of times. If you get stuck, I'm like, what would you really say in this situation?
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. And a lot of times if you can write a conversation and you read it off on paper like it's a conversation, you know, those are like, he stopped loving her today. You know, I mean, you could just read that, and that's, you know.
When I was in Muscle Shoals, there was a great songwriter there by the name of Robert Byrne. He passed away several years ago, but he wrote songs. He wrote, I think, 4 number 1s for Earl Thomas Conley. He wrote What I'd Say, Once in a Blue Moon. That was a close one. And in his song, I Can't Win for Losing You, I remember when I lived in Muscle Shoals, I would study those lyrics, because think about it, how it opens. "Hey, how have you been? Good to see you again."
Yeah.
I mean, I can't win for losing. Of course, that was a hook.
Yeah.
But it's still, I just can't get over you. It's just real,
yeah,
you know? And then the song, What I'd Say, you know, you're looking well, or
go to hell. Yeah. Yeah. That's probably my favorite Earl Thomas Conley song. You know, I mean, I wish we had more of that kind of writing now. I feel like it's just kind of, I mean, I know that it's out there, but it's just, you got to kind of find it. You know what I mean? It's because it's not popular right now. You know, story
the
songs.
Bar, I know the bar was so high at that time for songs.
Yeah. And
it didn't matter who wrote it. I mean, if somebody could come in with, I mean, a good example of that is like the song Little Rock. Like Tom Douglas wrote that. And, you know, he was living, I think, in Texas, but it was such a great song. It found its way. And there's many other examples of writers like that and songs like that. But
I know you got to know, and by the way, anybody that don't follow Bobby on Instagram or social media, please go follow him, because he posts these really, really personal pictures with people like Little Jimmy Dickens I've seen, and you'll tell the story behind it. You know, like I remember this day, and like maybe you were spending all day with him and he was talking, or y'all were writing, or so go follow him. Go follow Bobby Tomberlin on any social media. With Tater there in mind, how do you think y'all kind of just hit it off and become so? Was he like a mentor type thing, or was it like y'all didn't talk about that kind of thing?
I'll tell you exactly. And, you know, and you were asking about like some of the Williams family. All of it has been in an organic way. I've never chased it. That's like Sam, like Hillary, you know, just meeting her randomly, and it's just come together, you know, and it's just comfortable. It's right. And with Little Jimmy, I met him when I was sound engineer for Bill Anderson from the Opry. I took that gig after my Kroger gig, and, you know, we're talking 1998 through 2001. So many of those legends were still around, like Porter Wagoner, Little Jimmy, and we did a lot of package shows where there may be 5 to 7 artists on the show, and Little Jimmy was on a lot of our shows. So after everybody else would go to bed, we'd be at the hotel. He would just sit in the bar and have a glass of wine, and I would just sit there with him, and I love talking to him like an old granddad. I didn't ever look at him like, oh, this is Little Jimmy Dickens and the Rhinestones. And I love that Little Jimmy, but I love the Little Jimmy that just wore his little button ups out of his, jeans and his little hat, not his stage hat, but his little straw hat, and just the sweet man that was so funny off stage, maybe even funnier off stage, if that's possible. And he just loved life. He loved Christmas time. He loved decorating. He was like a kid. I helped him many times decorate his outside of his home, and he was like, well, we need to go to Big Lots, we need to go to Kmart, we need to, and his wife would be like, Jimmy, we have enough. No, I need to check on. And I mean, really the spirit of a child. And I think that's why he lived to be 94, because I mean, of course he loved what he did. He loved going to the Grand Ole Opry, but he loved going to casinos. He didn't spend a lot of money, but I mean, he just loved to play slots and just sat there, and loved Christmas time, loved, never forget, I remember being at a show, and he would like share little moments like what I'm about to tell. One day we were at a show, and he said, Minnie Pearl told me one time, she said, just go out and love the audience, and they'll love you back if you love them and really show that and really mean it.
Wow.
And, he would share little things like that. And I remember going with him to a show over in, I think, the Georgia Mountain Fair, and we ended up getting lost, and I didn't want to tell him I was lost. After about 30 minutes, he looked up, under his head. He said, believe you're lost, aren't you, Bobby? I mean, it's just funny. I mean, and when he said things like that, it was so much funnier than it probably really is. But boy, do I miss him. I took him to the Grand Ole Opry the last time he performed, never dreaming it was his last. In the last year of his life, if I were in town, I would drive him out there. Wow. And it was just such a thrill to be with him. And I remember just simple things like getting on I-65 off Concord Road where he lived, and traffic would be just dry. People would be driving. Good Lord, goodness. I mean, look at them. They're going 120, just funny little things like that. And I remember the last time I took him to the Opry, it was at the Ryman during the holidays. And he looked up at me and he said, Bobby, you don't know about missing someone until you've missed them for over 60 years. He said, I miss Hank Williams as much today as I did in 1953. Now that's...
Man.
That's really something you don't forget.
Man. Yeah. Yeah, that's something that you wouldn't think about until you're, I guess, around, when you get up on an age. And, Bobby Bear told me after Mel died. No, it was after Merle died, because Bobby's birthday was the day after Merle's birthday, and the same, Merle died on his birthday, Haggard.
I forgot about that.
And Bobby's birthday was the next day, and I called him just to kind of talk, and he said, I said, well, happy birthday, and I'm sorry to hear about Merle. And he said, well, you get to a point where you lose so many of them, and it's just like a passerby, thing. And he said, what's really scary is when you start thinking and you can't think of anybody that's older than you are that that's something you couldn't think about. I almost teared up, when he said that, because that's just really, man, people, all these legends have lived these crazy lives, been everywhere, had everything they could want. Most of them. Some of them, lost it, like George Jones. Some of them just, and to end up with that kind of thought right there, that's, I don't know if that'd be, that's a scary thing, but I don't know if that would be like, okay, I'm just ready to go now. You know, I mean, I feel like some people could really get kind of wrapped up in that kind of thinking, you know, like it can put you in that would have to just put you in like a state of just something totally different.
Well, I know now, I've had so many friends that are a lot older that have passed away. And I've thought it a couple of times. I'm like, wow, sometimes I feel like I have more friends that have passed on than ones remaining that are very close.
Yeah.
So I can only imagine somebody like Bobby Bear. I remember Little Jimmy one time at the Opry backstage. He looked at me and he was always, it seems like, in deep thought so much of the time. And you had no clue what was going on in that head.
Yeah.
But I remember one time he says, it's really something to still be here and go out on that stage when you go out there and you're standing in the wings, and then you start thinking about Minnie and Roy Acuff and Bill Monroe, and then you think even about Waylon Jennings already being gone. And he says that's really something when you realize, wow, I'm one of the last guys standing.
Yeah, it would have to be. It would have to be. I'll never forget Bobby saying that to me, because I could hear the hurt in his voice when he said it. Of course, Bear, I mean, he when he sings, I love his voice now too, because it's got that age in it, but it's still Bobby Bear. And man, he's like, he just, you can hear that Mary Gauthier song that he did on that last record, or he did two of them, but
I Drink.
Oh my God.
That I was just listening to that last week. He has such a lonesome sound in his voice, unlike anyone maybe. I mean, other than Hank Williams. I mean, it's just so lonesome. And I love it. I love it.
The songwriter, the song that y'all wrote, I love that song too. That's a great song.
Thank you so much. It's funny. That song kind of originated at Hank Williams's grave. The guy that takes care of that grave, his name's Terry Faust. And he's a great songwriter, actually. He lives in Slapout, Alabama. I bet you haven't heard of Slapout, have you?
Even I ain't heard of Slapout. I'm slap out of ideas where that might be.
Not a lot of people have, But anyway, Terry was there taking care of the grave. I was driving through Montgomery, and I thought, I haven't been by there in a while. I'm going to stop by it. And I stopped by, and it was just a beautiful day. I mean, up on that hill, and the train was passing by below and blowing the whistle. And all of a sudden, Terry's like, I was really having a moment there, just really a peaceful moment. Terry's like, man, I got a song idea. And I'm thinking, no, not right now. And then he shares some of that idea with me about the songwriter's song. And I'm like, man, I love this. It just so happens I was writing with Bear, and then we finished it. But I always laugh. I'm like, did Hank kind of whisper that idea to you?
Yeah, he probably did. I've been out there to the grave. It's kind of a little vibe that you get. I mean, I've been inspired out there. I stopped by the museum that Beth Petty.
Oh yeah.
I love that museum, man. I took Grandma there.
If you're watching, listening, and you've never been, we're plugging all these things today, but definitely go to the Hank Williams Museum in Montgomery. They have the car. I'm sorry to break that up, but I just realized I'm wearing the seat belt. That's going to look so funny. Whoops, I'm in a car, like I said, in front of the Crenshaw County Courthouse, and I parked and never took my seat belt off.
I didn't realize it either.
I don't know why that's cracking me up, but it is. But yeah, the museum is, so many of the stage clothes, and you saw it. But really, people, if you want to really feel that whole vibe in 1950, go there.
Yeah,
the buildings.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say the buildings all around there. It's the same buildings. They don't tear them down there. They don't put in pharmacies on every corner there in Montgomery. Not in that little strip. of land. And you go there and you see this high rise. And that's where WSFA radio was, where Hank and Audrey played in the mornings for 10 years. You look around, you don't have to look very far. There's a place called, what is it called? It's a theater, the Davis Theater, but it used to be the Paramount Theater. That's where Hank Williams played before Tarzan movies on Saturday afternoon back in the 40s. The place where he played his last songs. It used to be called the Elite Cafe. Well, it's still there. It's not called the Elite, but it's just, a couple of streets over. So, his favorite little restaurant, Chris's Hot Dogs.
Chris's Hot Dogs, yep.
So it's like, again, stepping back in, I said the 50s, but the 40s, when you go there. But do yourself a favor, make a trip to Montgomery.
Yeah, and also go to Georgiana and to the childhood home. That's a really cool treat, too. Beautiful house, too.
It is. And that captures a whole different vibe. That captures the young Hank. And just trying to imagine the old blues street singer T-Tot showing him, them playing underneath that house. There's an open area where you can get under there and just kind of sit. So just imagine a young Hank Williams and this blues man playing underneath that house. And there it is. You can go. I love Georgiana too.
There's so many beautiful spots in Alabama, all the way up in North Alabama, all the way down to South Alabama. A lot of, you was talking about Troy earlier, where Hank Jr. has a place. A lot of Troy is not really changed. I feel like if you go in a gas station, actually, that's true, because we were coming from Panama City one time. We went to the beach. We went right through Troy, and I said, I'm going to find the Almira Club. And nobody could tell me an address or anything how to get there. Bobby, I stopped by a gas station. There's these two old guys in overalls sitting in there. Yeah, you go up here and you turn left by that other gas station up the road, and you'll come to this four-way crossing. And you go through that first, and then the second one you'll turn left on, and it'll be about 3/4 of a mile down there on the left. It'll be right there. And I was like, okay, got in the car. She's like, what'd they say? I said, hold on, don't say nothing. And I followed the exact steps while I still had them in my mind. There it was. There it was. Have you been out there?
So, I haven't. I have never been out there. I can't believe I haven't. But that's, for anyone watching, Hank Jr. cut an album there called the Almira Club. And that's one of those places where Hank and Audrey and the Drifting Cowboys would play. Just like so many. There's so many community centers around here that were schoolhouses. Right over here, there's this little community called Rutledge. And recently, someone found a little clipping from the newspaper advertising a show that Hank was doing at the Rutledge Schoolhouse.
That's cool. That's really
so
cool.
Oh, there's a house. It actually has 2 apartments. It's divided. It's out here on the Troy Highway, just outside of my hometown. And it used to be called Club 29, and it actually was a club. And Hank probably played there every Thursday night for 20 weeks back in the 40s.
Wow. So much history, just in that area. All the history we've talked about just with Hank Williams. It's just amazing.
It really is.
So if you're in the Montgomery area, we've just given you the Williams tour, basically, of where to go. All you're missing is the pamphlet and the GPS coordinates, but you can find those. So your new album, man, it's really good. How did you just want to put something out there, or did you just have these songs and you just wanted to, felt like it should be out there? Is it something you've been working on for a while, or?
No, not at all. I put out one album out called Out of Road that has the song, The Songwriter you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And my version, One More Day. I put that out a while back, but just released this one song for now called I've Lived Country Music. And I just, was in the Muscle Shoals area visiting back in June, and I drove by Wishbone Studios, and I thought, gosh, I haven't been in here in years. And I walked in, and my old friend Billy Lawson was there, and we started talking, and he says, man, you should record something here. And then I thought, you know what? I have just the song that I'll record here. And, that's the studio where Hank recorded Family Tradition and so many other hits, and the Temptations, Roy Orbison, Mac McAnally, got his start there, and it has quite the history. And, there's still people cutting there. T. Graham Brown, Sammy Kershaw, B.J. Thomas before he passed. And it just felt right. It felt like walking back into 1979, other than the equipment is updated. And I love that feeling. It was inspiring. And I'm so glad I did that. And I plan to do more, actually.
And that song, I've Lived Country Music, I mean, it's been getting out there pretty good.
It really has. It's kind of surprised me, to be honest with you, because I just wanted to put some music out. And because I do a lot of shows, and it's shocked me how many radio stations have actually been playing it. A lot of secondary stations, in Texas and Michigan and Alabama, and been getting a lot of play in the UK. And a lot of the radio people have told me we love it because it's real. The people love it because it is real and from the heart. I was kind of hesitant about the song in the beginning because I didn't want it to look like, oh, here's a song, look what I've done. But I realized it comes from such a humble place. It says, I dreamed of doing this in a 2-stoplight town, again, where I'm at today. And it's totally like, I'm just saying, I can't believe it. I can't believe some of these things have happened, and I really can't. I mean, sitting here reflecting, and I'm actually doing it here in my hometown. It even hits to the heart a little more today, doing it here. I'm glad I am doing it here.
Yeah. It's not a thing where you're just saying, hey, look at me, everybody. It's just,
no,
that's what you were saying. It's not, I'm not bragging about all this stuff that I've got to meet, people I've got to meet or whatever. I totally relate to that. That people ask me sometimes like about meeting people, and I say, I don't really, I don't feel comfortable because I've not reached a level of success that I feel like I can just kind of casually say, something like I would say to you, but you don't take it like I'm trying to be a prick or something. I just have a problem with like talking to people a lot of times about these things because I feel like I'm trying to show off or something, but that's totally not the case.
I don't take, I totally, this is the most we've ever talked. I mean, I think maybe we've texted something, but I've heard all about you from my buddy, Mark Narmore. I know your heart. I've seen some of your posts and heard some of your music, so I know where you're coming from. But the song that I released, again, some of those lines, I sold groceries to Conway Twitty. I didn't know him.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't go write a song with him or sing with him. I sold groceries when I was at Kroger to him. I shook Merle Haggard's hand. I didn't know him, or I got to tell Merle Haggard how much his songs meant to me. But then again, I have been blessed to know some wonderful people like Little Jimmy or Phil Everly and different ones. And so it's just a beauty. You know what? I'm just thankful. I mean, I was trying to say something a lot more deeper than that, but the truth is I'm just thankful. Can't believe it. I have a lot more I want to do, and I basically just keep doing what I'm doing. And I'm thankful for it. I'm thankful that I left. It was hard to leave this town. It was very safe here for me. It was safe going into a radio station. The people are wonderful. They're so supportive. It's hard to leave that and go to a big city where, no one knows your name and there's crazy traffic. So
But just like Jamie Johnson and Teddy Gentry said, that God put stars in Alabama to help you find your way back home,
That's very true. And it doesn't take long, hit I-65 and then 331, and I'm here in 5 hours. So I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful it's not, a 12-hour drive.
Yeah. Have you ever heard the song Bible and a Bus Ticket Home? The Danny
No.
Confederate Railroad, I think it was on their first or second record.
I don't remember that one.
Oh, it's a good one. It's
I'll check it out.
It's that kind of thing too. You working on anything new in the future or anything like that, music wise?
Just always writing songs. I've written some stuff lately that I'm really proud of, and I feel strong about, and I'll be going back in at some point and recording some more stuff, and just, love doing shows. Speaking of Georgiana, I have a show coming up here with Tess Frizzell, very talented singer-songwriter who comes from a crazy country music family, Lefty Frizzell, David Frizzell was her uncles, and Alan, her dad, and her grandmother Dottie West and mother Shelley West. So those shows are fun. And I don't know. I'm just blessed with a lot of people, whether it's Martin Armour singing Neil Young on the prayer list, that inspires me to be on stage and share a stage with people like that, or Sam. And it's just, it's all good. Yeah, all good.
Yeah. That's a good way of putting it, man. Tell them where you can go get your new record, new stuff at.
BobbyTomberlinmusic.com. And then, of course, I'm all over the social media like everyone else. And it's spelled Tomberlin. Facebook, Instagram, and all that fun stuff.
Good to talk to you, man. Really
good to talk to you too. I've never done an interview before or a podcast with a seatbelt on, most of it, but that was funny.
Well,
but I really enjoyed this. And like I said, it was really cool doing it while I was back in my hometown and just reflecting, thinking about a lot of stuff that I haven't thought about in a long, long time.
I'm just afraid if you sit there much longer that the judge is going to come bring you in, put you on the witness stand.
Oh, that would be just like him. I actually was kind of hoping he was going to come out because I would have called him over and put him on the camera. That would have been fun.
Well, man.
Oh my gosh, it's such a small town. There's my uncle going in the court.
There you go.
Probably paying for his license plate. Look at that.
How about that?
Wow. Uncle Leo. Didn't know he was in town today. Lived about 20 miles up the road in the country in Bradleton, Alabama. Thank you very much.
There's a reason for everything.
I'm telling you.
It all leads together. It's all a big puzzle, and it's just there's a reason for everything. I'm a firm believer in that, man.
Me too. Well, it's just been a pleasure, and
yes, sir.
And great getting to know you more, and look forward to seeing you soon.
Yep, you too. And I appreciate everybody watching and listening to Picking It Out this week with Bobby Tomberlin, and we'll see you next time.